I've been baking cookies literally longer than I can remember, and over the years I have picked up a lot of tips and tricks, and I have really worked on crafting the absolute best chocolate chip cookie. Today I'm showing you a super simple way to elevate your chocolate chip cookies to absolute gourmet bakery level. You're not going to be using any fancy ingredients, you're going to be using pantry staples, but it's all about how we use them. First things up is our butter. You're just going to need a cup of unsalted butter for this recipe, but it's about how we use it. We're going to be browning our butter, a simple step that's really going to take the flavor to the next level. And it's going to make your house smell amazing in the meantime. So to brown your butter, all you need is a medium-sized saucepan. You want something light colored just because that's going to make it easier for you to tell once your butter is browned and not burn it. Let's take it over to the stovetop. Add the butter to the pan. Cutting it just speeds up the melting process unless it happened more evenly. It's not mandatory. Turn your stovetop heat to low. We're just going to cook this over low heat until the butter is completely melted. Then I turn up the heat just a notch to just above medium heat. So once you increase your heat, you're going to notice foam happening on the surface and it's going to start sizzling and bubbling. Be careful, it could splatter. Just keep it moving with the spatula the whole time so it doesn't burn. So during this process, we're cooking out the water and we're browning the milk solids in the butter. Once the bubbling stops, it means most of the water has been cooked out, and that's when we really need to pay careful attention. Soon afterwards, you'll notice browning on the bottom of the pan. Once most of the bubbling has stopped and you have some browning, you're going to want to immediately remove this from heat. Make sure you're scraping the sides of the pan. All right, see that browning? It can be hard to see under the foam. We're going to take this off the heat. We don't want anything to burn. Scrape all of those brown bits that we can into the bowl. And it's really easy to know if you burned the brown butter because it smells burnt instead of smelling lovely and amazing. So if you burn it, unfortunately, you do have to start over. But your house should smell amazing right now. And this is just step one to some of the best chocolate chip cookies I've ever tasted. Second step is to wait. You need to have a little patience because this needs to cool down until it's no longer warm to the touch. So, if you touch the bottom of the pan, that's really hot. Yours needs to feel room temperature. So let's set this aside. Once it is cooled completely, ta-da! Then we can go on with our recipe. For those of you who enjoy the science behind things, here's why it's important. If the butter is hot, it's going to melt your sugar. You're going to have a super greasy cookie dough. It's not going to bake properly. So it's just really important you have a little patience. Now your butter does not need to be solid. It's okay if it is, but it can be a little bit trickier to work with. So I like mine to be room temperature and still a little liquid just because it's easier that way. So now we can add our sugars. This recipe starts off brown sugar heavy. That's really going to give you a nice depth of flavor. Technically, you can use all light brown sugar, it's fine. You will need 1 cup of brown sugar, that's 200 grams. I recommend, if you're trying to go next level, do a blend of light and dark brown sugar. So 100 grams of each or half a cup of each. And make sure this is firmly packed. Not only will that give you an accurate measurement, but if you're using a scale, which you should be, it's going to break up any lumps and just make it easier to incorporate the sugar. And this dark brown sugar, extra moisture, extra flavor, just a tip to help get you those gourmet bakery style cookies. Next, we're adding some granulated sugar. This is 2/3 cup or 135 grams of granulated sugar. Let's go ahead and stir these into the butter. This recipe literally has hundreds of 5-star reviews, and these little things we're doing, like they seem small, but they all add up. And once you try these cookies, you will see why it's so highly rated. All right, next, our eggs. You need 2 large eggs for this recipe. Room temperature is really best because we have room temperature ingredients. Otherwise, we don't want to shock the dough, make it more difficult to work with by adding cold eggs. So 1 room temperature egg, 2 room temperature eggs. If your eggs are in the fridge, just to go ahead and put them in a bowl of warm water, not hot water, but like warm water for 15 minutes, and that'll bring them to room temperature quickly than they would get on their own. I also like to add the vanilla extract here. We're going to add 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla. This is my homemade vanilla, so you might see some of those little vanilla bean specks. That's another way you can make this recipe a little extra gourmet. Use your own vanilla extract. All right, so let's go ahead and mix this together, get everything well combined, and things should be smelling really good about now. Any brown sugar lumps, just press them out. All right, let's slide this out of the way. Now we need a separate bowl for our dry ingredients. Start with our flour. You need 2 3/4 cup or 340 grams of all-purpose flour for this recipe. Next, a little secret ingredient that I like to use, oh man, if I can figure out which one of these is which, is a teaspoon of cornstarch. So a little bit of cornstarch helps keep the cookies tender and soft for longer. So it's just a little bit, goes a long way, and it really makes a difference in your cookies, as you will see when you try this. We will also add a teaspoon each of baking powder and baking soda. It might have been baking soda and baking powder after I measured them out. I forgot which was which, but they're all going in the same place. We're also going to be adding 3/4 teaspoon of salt, and look what I got for Christmas was 3/4 teaspoon from my content editor. So 3/4 teaspoon. We'll whisk everything together and let's gradually add this to the dough. Now it's very important that you add the flour gradually. So I would recommend doing it in like 4 parts, especially if you're mixing everything together by hand like I am. One thing to know about dough made with brown butter is that even when you adjust for moisture, the water that's lost, brown butter dough is going to feel drier than other cookie dough, typically. This does not mean your final baked good will be drier, but the fat solids just act differently in the dough, so it just typically feels like a more dry and crumbly dough. Now, because of this, it can be a little bit difficult to work with if it's chilled for a long time, so I don't usually like to chill this dough longer than 30 minutes. It's not that it's impossible, it just can be more difficult to work with. So if you were going to do that, I would probably chill for 30 minutes, scoop the dough, and then bake it at your leisure. I wouldn't try scooping it like a couple days later. Not impossible, just annoying. All right, last bit of flour. It's actually kind of a lot to add. So once you have all of that flour absorbed, no dry streaks. So let's talk about our chocolate chips. Fun fact, I am not actually crazy about chocolate chips. If you want to make your cookies more gourmet, I highly recommend using chopped chocolate instead. So I have 10 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate here. A dark chocolate would also work if you prefer that. And if I can find a knife, we're going to chop this up. Now, if you only have chocolate chips, that'll be fine. You're going to want to use between 1.5 and 2 cups of semi-sweet chocolate chips. Now, I personally think this dough tastes so good. I kind of like even a little bit less chocolate. I personally have come to prefer 8 ounces of chocolate in the dough, but for a more standard chocolate ratio, you would use 10. These cookies shine even without a ton of chocolate in them. All right, let's go ahead and add this to our dough. So the nice thing about using this chocolate bar instead of chocolate chips is you are going to get such a nice variety of chocolate in every bite. You'll have some of these like big pools of melty chocolate, like big chocolate chunks, but all of these like little dusty shards are just going to infuse into the dough so beautifully. Get yourself a bench scraper. It's like $1 and it's one of my favorite kitchen tools. Helps you clean up your counter after making dough too. All right, next key tip is you do want to chill your dough. So we started with, a melted butter. We want the dough to firm up a bit so it doesn't spread too much so we have thicker cookies. Also, 30 minutes is going to let the flavors develop a little bit more, and this cookie is all about flavor. So we're going to give it that 30 minutes in the fridge. And meanwhile, start preheating your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, we're back with our chilled cookie dough. Your oven should be preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit at this point, 175 Celsius. For that plastic wrap. We're going to scoop the cookie dough into 2 tablespoon-sized scoops. If you're using a scale, that's about 50 grams. And you might notice, again, the dough might feel a little bit dry. Because of this, what I recommend is after you scoop the dough, I can need a little bit more there, just roll it into a smooth ball between your palms. You can press it together if you need to. And then space the cookies at least 2 inches apart on the baking sheet. One of the biggest mistakes I see cookie bakers make is they put too many cookies on a baking sheet. What happens is the cookies kind of like spread and touch each other and just bake into one flat mess. That is just typically a product of putting your cookies too close together. Give them breathing room, they need it. Rolling them is also going to just give you more uniform looking cookies. So if you are going for that, bakery look, it helps. If you want to make these larger, you can. You'll just have to increase the baking time. Into the oven these go. Bake 1 tray at a time, center rack. For 10 to 12 minutes, you should notice some light golden browning happening around the edges of the cookies. But another important tip for incredible cookies is you want the centers to look just slightly underdone. Pull them out when they're slightly underdone, and then as the cookies cool on the baking sheet, you're gonna let them cool completely on the baking sheet, they will finish cooking in the center without overdoing it. So this will give you cookies that stay soft for days. All right, these look beautiful. Since I'm sharing a bunch of tips and tricks today, I wanted to share just something small that helps if you want your cookies to look nice and uniform. If they come out of the oven, these look pretty good because we rolled them. But if yours come out of the oven with wonky edges, you can just do that one little trick where you take like a large round cookie cutter and just gently nudge them in. Again, these look pretty good, so we're not making much of a difference. Be gentle. If you're too aggressive, you can kind of like damage the structural integrity of your cookie. If you don't have one of those cookie scoops, but you still want the pretty cookies, for years, I just used a pair of spoons and would use that to just kind of round the cookies. Is this necessary? Absolutely not. Most likely no one cares how round your cookies are, but I take a lot of pictures of my cookies, and for people who sell them, this could be important. So I just wanted to share that. Is this my final tip? It might be. Last thing we're adding to these cookies is a sprinkle of flaky sea salt. Meld-on sea salt is my favorite. I've bought a small box of it that I've been using for years. I'll try to remember to link to it, but it's just a meld-on salt. Looks like little pyramids, and you just crush them up. And a sprinkle of sea salt goes on the cookies while they're still warm. If you wait too long, it won't stick to the cookies, so you wanna do it while they're hot. And as I mentioned, these need to cool completely on the baking sheet because they should still be a little bit underdone in the center, so they're going to finish baking. I have a lot of chocolate chip cookies, I'm not gonna lie, I think they're all amazing, but these brown butter ones are one of my most popular and they get amazing reviews. Can't wait for you to try it. Please let me know what you think. I really do always love hearing from you. Let's break into it. This one's still a little warm. You like see those brown butter flecks? They look amazing. It's perfection. Seriously, this is that good. Today, you are going to wanna, sorry, I got distracted. What was I gonna say? Do it again. I have a lot of chocolate chip cookie. Just waiting.
For what?
Nothing. As long as you're quiet, you're fine. Ooh, this is like the best tasting cookie dough too.